All right. Hello
Feels like
to
that.
anyone at home. We will begin the business meeting open session. We are already called to order this morning from our summer workshop. So we will begin with public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to make public comment today? That's a no. Anyone online like to make public comment? That's a no. With that, I will close public comment. Chairman's report, I will keep incredibly brief, and just for the benefit of the viewing public for the reporting on this, we have just had, we've been here all day for a workshop all together. We are laying out the work ahead of us, which is considerable, and it's been productive, I think, and we will just leave it at that for now. Consent agenda. We received the information I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. With the acceptance of warrants for vouchers of fiscal year 24, 1006 and 1007, and fiscal year 23, 1082 and 1083, and also the minutes for June 26th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I will say I did not realize that the minutes were at the end of the thing, so I didn't have a chance to look at the minutes yet. Any other discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and I'm going to abstain because I didn't see the minutes, so the motion carries. Subcommittee reports. We do not have a facility, we did not meet as a facility subcommittee, and we have the field replacement on the agenda later, so we can bypass that. Finance subcommittee report. So what I'm going to do, and Anna was with me so she can keep me honest here, is just give you a brief heads up on the collaboration meeting situation. So as I have already emailed out to everyone, Pam had sent an email to the members of the collaboration group, and when not already represented, the chairs of all those committees represented, to see if they thought there'd be value in meeting post budget approval. We met a couple weeks ago, and I don't want to get too into every different word, but we can answer questions after, because the document that I sent is the result of that. We recognized that one of the issues coming out of last year was that we had different report outs from all the different groups represented. And so what we decided there was that one thing we would like to do moving forward is have a consistent report out that'll be covered in this. So offering the official report out, as this should be reported to both towns' finance committees and both towns' select boards. That we had two key discussion topics with all the participants. The first was the future of collaboration group, and the second was addressing the fiscal year 24 budget and beyond. The key points, so for the first discussion topic, we're discussing the pros and cons of collaboration meetings, value of continuing to meet, the makeup of the group, and meeting in person versus hybrid, and public versus privately. And then also discuss the purpose of the group, and that would direct the decisions moving forward. But I'll just, for the record here, give a brief overview of the outcome here, and there is an action item on each of these. The majority of that group, which again was represented all of the key stakeholder bodies, felt that it's important to continue meeting in this way, in the way that it's been done in the past. So that is privately and with all those stakeholders represented, with the goal of developing a new long-term strategy for financial stability, aligned between the towns as much as possible. That the group will not be a decision-making body and has not been, but just serve as a problem-solving group of manageable size, and with the ability to discuss sensitive issues freely that face the town boards. But the issue of transparency for the public and consistency in reporting were the problems that we recognize needed to be addressed. So two outcomes for that would be following each meeting, a summary will be distributed that will then be approved by each participant. So this summary that came to you is the first example of that. Every participant listed did in fact send an A-OK on it. I had a one word change, then it was a good catch. And that's it. So the process here is intended to address the idea that we have different messages going out to each body after the fact. And then the second was to address the idea that the conversation taking place at collaboration doesn't reflect all of our bodies' inputs and interests. How do we address that? Would be to add in scheduling of 3 all boards meetings throughout the school year, throughout the budget process. The proposed would be to have the first in early fall before we before the initial budget is presented. Then the second in winter while things are being refined, and the third after the budget adoption, but before the town meeting, so that we all are on the same page if necessary. A fourth could be added after if needed. The agenda of those meetings would be determined by the responses to collaboration group, which I neglected to say that each of these summaries needs to then have a response. So I'm reporting this out to you, and after this meeting, I will need to send a response to the rest of the collaboration group based on the action items in this document. We're going through it a little bit more in detail right now, but my hope is in the future we won't need to cover it in quite so much detail. So again, adding those 3 all boards meetings based on the responses to what's going on in collaboration group will determine the agendas for those. So the action requested is to discuss, for this topic, is to discuss this as a board and respond to the proposed items regarding the future of collaboration group. So as I respond to this for our committee, I need to know if we are willing to support collaboration meeting in this way, continuing to meet in this way with these revised plans in place, which you have had a chance to read and yes.
Can I add on, to clarify and to answer your question earlier, Kate? So it's not, the reason why I think at the time to discuss, to continue to have a collaboration meeting, not public, is so it can be a working group. And not a decision making like Teresa said, or not even to bring any kind of decision at all or the decision related. It's really just to talk. So right now people are talking about what are some of the options for like the next year's revenue, like including a regional agreement. What are some of the options, A, B, C, and D, that we're going to talk about it. Now, to make it transparent and everybody's included, is to add on those 5 entity included, the 5 committee included meetings that everybody is public and everybody joins. So it's the 2 board selectmen, the 2 finance committees, and the school committee.
The 5 or the 3?
There are 5.
3
right?
meetings.
She's talking about 5 bodies.
5 bodies.
5 bodies.
Yes.
What was the Quint?
Yeah. The couple boards meetings is what.
So that is when we would discuss openly
Right.
about issues, decisions, what to do next, and all that stuff.
So I guess that my question was more, not that I thought the public meetings should be for everyone to discuss, but more so in that when we started doing silent observers in our negotiation meetings, it gave everyone an opportunity to see, everyone who was a stakeholder, an opportunity to see what conversations were happening and to hear the thought process behind them. And I don't understand why that, I guess I'm curious as to what the reasoning would be that would preclude another member from the Board of Selectmen or another member from the school committee or another member from the finance committee to go and listen to the conversation that's happening.
I can answer that. It was specifically, because we discussed that. It was specifically because in that context, as a problem-solving group, there will be things that come up from time to time of a sensitive nature that the different boards and bodies aren't necessarily ready to bring forth in a public meeting just yet, but that might inform one another's part of the discussion here.
So is there, like, when we did silent observers in negotiations, it wasn't technically a public meeting because only stakeholders could attend as silent observers.
Yeah.
I think people can still attend as assignment observers in collaboration, right? Because Sarah was there.
So what we didn't come to consensus on was the makeup of the committee, whether, for instance, they will continue having one representative versus their chair attend, because it was helpful to have the FinCom chair attend also. But sorry, what was the first part of that?
the silent observer. I think the question back would be asking if that's allowed.
So we discussed that as an option and the majority of the group felt that it would be most beneficial to be private at this.
But it sounds like you were saying most beneficial to be private because you didn't want it to become a public meeting. And I thought
Right.
what Kate was saying is couldn't we do that without it becoming a public meeting?
Yes.
So part of the
Probably
conversation
not,
was.
because once you get more than a certain number of each
Only
board,
if we're negotiating.
what I would say is
Right.
you're not getting support from, this isn't a judgment, it's an observation, not support from this group on that piece. I would bring it back to the company.
I don't know that we're not yet. I think we're still in clarifying question point.
I guess I have significant reservations knowing or getting the impression that there were some communication breakdowns coming out of that group. And I understand that this document is part of addressing that, right? It's providing like an official report out that everybody agrees on.
Yep.
But I also don't feel like this document gives me any insight into the conversation that's happening and what different stakeholders are contributing to that conversation, which I think is important to know, not just what the group consensus, not just what the majority consensus was coming out, but, oh, what were the concerns that were voiced by whom?
Yeah.
Because some of us are, we're representing two different towns, and if we are representing one town, we might be interested in what the concerns were that were voiced from that specific stakeholder, even if it was not a majority.
That's fair. And so
I would
maybe
agree
if you would
with
like to
Pam,
make
would be
a motion on that,
definitely
because just so you know, that it was very specifically, that was part of the conversations that we work by. Like, we send out a report out based on what the majority feels. 'Cause we're all so if
Mhm.
you're interested in that level of granularity, then that would be not in support of this as a.
I think that it's not so much that I am interested in general in that level of granularity, but I would be interested in why that level would not be available to somebody if they wanted to sit in and,
So would you make
Learn.
a motion about that so that I can send a reply on it? If we can take a vote on it.
I make a motion, well, I don't even know what I'm making a motion on, because this isn't something that we're voting, right? You're just reporting back on it.
Well,
So could I make a motion that stakeholders may have silent observers attend
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
meetings without debate or negotiation?
that be part of my report back. Yeah,
So this board would request,
yeah, exactly.
got it.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? All in
Third.
favor? All in favor? It's reply, okay. And then the second part of that is, the second discussion topic was addressing the fiscal year 24 budget and beyond. The group agreed that the above adjustments are only useful if they get us toward, a longer term solution and a better, more effective budget cycle. So, there was some sharing of ideas, and the key points were the question of what the district needs from the towns to move forward, was posed. So like, what do you need in order to get this started earlier and get this started most effectively? There was some discussion on alignment of resources and expectations. Still unclear how aligned or misaligned we actually are. And then members started sharing ideas for long-term solutions that they, as individuals or small groups, have been considering. And so the outcomes, based on the majority of the group, feel that it will need to meet regularly to work through the ideas that members bring forth through this process. So for instance, if we say we want to address, we want to look at XYZ, we want to, whatever, address XYZ, to bring it forth through that, and then meet regularly to work through some of those things with all the stakeholders. And then at the same time, the upcoming budget does have to, those are for the long-term solutions, but we also have to work through the current budget, and the district needs what it needs. So the requested action would be to respond to these two outcomes. Would be that each town will share information about its budget capacity and constraints at the fall all boards meeting. So when we have that all boards, that principal boards meeting, that at that time, each town will be expected to bring their numbers, their constraints to that point. That is new. That is not something we've had in the past necessarily. And if other meetings need to take place before that to make it happen, then that's those boards' jobs to do that. And the second is that collaboration group meetings continue to serve as a venue for budget solutions to be proposed. So for instance, if we have an idea for a solution, we then bring it to that collaboration group so that it's vetted by the other bodies. Same thing for, one finance committee has a proposed solution, they bring it to this group to problem solve through it so that we're getting representation from all the boards on that, which then goes back to us to do it. It's a longer process, but that's the idea. And that no binding decisions will be made at the collaboration group, but they will support the will of the majority in deciding what to send to boards for consideration in terms of what happens in there. So the action requested is to respond to that, to those two outcomes. Thoughts? Or clarifying questions, I should say.
Can I ask a stepping back question?
Yeah.
Before I get to this? You were probably the strongest advocate for changing the process.
Yes.
I appreciate the addition of these all board meetings. Scheduling them, managing them is going to be a challenge, but I think that moves us in a way towards transparency. The way you're describing the collaboration meetings, though, it still sounds like it's a deliberation meeting, right? You're examining solutions, making recommendations, vetting stuff, right? That sounds like deliberation. That doesn't sound like just information sharing. Given that you were the biggest advocate for a change, do you feel like this is a substantive change in the way that you thought was necessary?
So this is where we meet the crux of what happens when one person has a feeling that is different from the will of the board, right? So my answer has to be, because I was part of this and did move forward with this, is that the majority of that group, which represented all the key stakeholder bodies, felt that this is the appropriate venue and way to do that.
So if I will just follow up to say, everything I'm hearing sounds like the collaboration portion of the meeting remains deliberative. There's now going to be minutes, essentially, with the report out.
Kind of minutes, but
They're
not
essentially
even,
minutes,
right?
okay? And therefore, and there is public interest in what is being talked about and deliberated in that. So to me, this is like the definition of a public meeting.
But there's not a quorum, so.
Doesn't matter. It's got a title. It's a meeting of itself. It is a forum in and of itself.
Erica, go ahead.
And I would just say that in addition to the concerns you raised during the cycle last year, my personal reflection was there was pieces I was missing that were impacting my ability to deliberate and make a educated decision. And I fear that that's going to continue, although I do appreciate that you're going to have outcomes from that. It sounds substantive, and it sounds like if I want to do my job the best way I can, I would be there as a silent observer every time. And I don't want to be. I mean, that sounds like an awful lot.
Yep.
But there's a tension there between if this is important information, don't we all need it?
So I want to take you, let me just ask, if maybe we could split these in two, because there are two outcomes here. One is that, do we support the idea that each town will share their budget constraints at the fall all boards meeting, that's a timeline for each town to bring forth their information. That's something we need to know as a group. Do we support that?
Yes,
Yes,
we absolutely need that.
And so what we're talking about is the second outcome, that the collaboration group serve as the venue for budget solutions.
Can I put an idea of it? What if we rotate? Like if it's two people from the school committee to the 10, what if we rotate for the collaboration meeting, which happened, I think, once a month? Would that help? So like everybody have an insight about what's being discussed and whatnot.
I feel like that could actually just confuse things even further because you won't have the context right from the last meeting. And you won't have
Supposedly we will
follow
from
through
the
with the
minutes.
next one.
Not
But
minutes.
these aren't, the minutes are.
No,
These are not minutes, yeah.
Yeah, the-
Summary.
I like the idea.
Yeah.
But I like the idea, but I also see the challenge.
I see that being as confusing, if not more. I do. And also, that would be something that we would need to that group, I mean, are we rotating everyone in or out?
Right,
I
and
think
if,
it would
and
be-
if every one of those other groups decided to do the same thing, then
thing.
we're having,
For what it's worth, the origin of the meeting was basically chair and town administrator, chair and superintendent, just getting together to share information about where each of the boards were in their process. And that's what became collaboration. I think that's where they see there's a management benefit that I think if I heard the people in the room talking about that a lot of times it's the town administrators talking and not necessarily the board chairs. It's morphed into something else, but
so
I think you just need to take back that this group is
Right.
not comfortable.
can I ask a question? What is the purpose of the meetings in between, right? If in the fall, we're having an all boards meeting and the towns are giving their budget constraints. To me, then that comes back to, from that, it's Pam and Avi and the school committee's job to determine to pass a budget. And we do so within those budget constraints. So if those have already been handed over to us in the fall,
Because we're also talking about a long-term picture here. That's the real.
so it's to set,
I would
We're not
say
just talking about.
a hypothetical example of the benefit of the group, and I think why they were leaning in the direction they were leaning is that we were in negotiations last year. We couldn't publicly talk about our negotiation strategy, what we anticipated the outcomes to be, whether we were gonna be way over what we budgeted. It started as a no surprises group as well. So it would be, we are up to our neck in it in negotiations. We don't think we're gonna solve it by the time we have to have a budget for you. It could blow, it could put us way over. We could come in way under. So you can talk about some of those variables. If the town's in negotiations with their unions, they can share important information as to why they may or may not be taking certain positions that they couldn't necessarily put out there at a quintuplet meeting.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people are trying to preserve is the ability to have some managerial level information to help inform some of the whys of a budget development process. I'm not advocating for it, but I think that's kind of at the root of sometimes there are personnel issues or legal issues that one of the entities is dealing with that is going to have a significant impact on their financial position.
I would say for a report back, it may be that this second outcome of collaboration group, serving as a problem solving group together might end up being answered if everybody were able to see what it was. So if we end up with silent observers, even for a time, we may end up understanding a little bit better and what the purpose is and what these are for. But again, last year it was a different scenario. It turned into something different than what it was. And so. Go ahead.
Can I just offer a parallel? So, with regard to your comment about it being deliberative, I certainly can see why you would think that, and I don't really want to debate that because I get it. I think when you realize that none of those people in those rooms have the authority to make any decisions or even to deliberate with their decision-making group, what sounds like lowercase d deliberative, and I get that, is really not an official deliberation because each of them really have to go back to their group who have deliberative authority to do things. And so what I heard in the last meeting was the group was saying, we're hearing a lot of people saying like, what's going on there? And how does this shape what we're doing? And is that the group that's deciding things? And nobody wants that. So what we want to do is have some report out, but then also a process for each of the respective committees to take, let's just say these notes and say, how do we feel about it? So right now we've done that on the structure, but the goal is to take information back for deliberation, but to use it as a potential, I think problem solving is not the right phrase. It's problem identification and problem ideation. So just to give you a parallel, when we do negotiations, and we would do, for example, the scatter grant. We didn't do that with the full negotiation group, but we would say, what are the big things that we want to do? School committee, we talk about executive session, NETA and their executive leadership, they bring it back to the big group. Big group says, here are some of the things we want to address. 2 or 3 people, math group, go work the model, come up with a couple different ideas, then bring it back to the bigger group. So it was kind of like a problem testing in what I would call a more nimble, effective way to get some things going, but with no authority to cut any deals or any of that. All had to go back to the bigger group to say what's going on. So my personal perspective is, I think it's a great tool. I think it gets us out of the purely political realm and more in the problem solving mode. So, you know, it's really up to you guys to decide. I think it would be in the school committee's best interest to keep it with the way it is, because I think it helps. But I certainly understand why you want to have more information and also the ability to deliberate. I think that was the goal of this conference, but ultimately it's up to you guys.
Thanks, that's a clarifying.
Yeah.
What you just described sounds a lot like how we operate subcommittees.
Yeah.
What's fundamentally different about the collaboration group from a subcommittee?
So subcommittees, I'd say it is kind of similar, except that the subcommittee, both members are members of the school committee.
But not a quorum.
But not, correct. But, so they're, you know, whether it, so it's similar in some ways. I think I agree with your point there. But I think it's a meeting of multiple different subcommittee single members, really, I think is the biggest difference. Because you're bringing different governmental bodies together with a single representative to say, here are some things you need to be thinking about.
But we do our subcommittees in public session too.
So pulling this in, again, because we can talk about this with the full group in the fall, if we like, if we get to that point. So what would be an accurate representation? Would someone make a motion for what you would like to report back on item 2 here about collaboration group serving as a venue?
I'll make a motion that the collaboration group, that we would encourage the collaboration group to be a public meeting.
Is there a second?
We appreciate and I'm comment on it now. We appreciate the intent and the reason for it. I think the lack of public access to it is prevalent.
Is there a second on that? I think it's important that we do this right.
I guess
not here
I'm
to
wondering why it needs to be a public meeting versus silent observers.
My perspective on that is because they are essentially, even if it's small d deliberation, they are essentially deliberating, problem solving, right? They're vetting solutions. Those get brought back to us. They influence what we do and what we consider as different boards or committees. And so therefore, there is a public interest in what happens there. There is an agenda. It's got an official title. There are a form of minutes. In all respects that I can see, it functionally serves as a public purpose.
How is it different than the needed deliberations?
So hold on. So we're doing this kind of, I just want to, was there a second? Okay, so that motion does not carry. Someone else will play. So taking off my reporting hat and now in my member of the group hat, I will make a motion that that we report back that we feel that having silent observers might be a good step toward understanding the purpose and coming to accept this number 2 out.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? 1. Okay,
To pursue.
you're opposed, okay. All right, so that's 5 and 2. Okay. Okay, thank you. So I will report that back, but when I say report that back, I'll follow the same process, which is that I will put together our response, send it out to each for A-OK based on what this conversation was. And then with the will of the group, I will send that back. It was much longer than we might otherwise take for this, just so you know. And seeing that we have no policy or negotiation subcommittee updates, maybe we can just keep with the finance subcommittee and rearrange to appoint our treasurer, Glenn Bergevin. Would you like to come join us? Please come join us. Hannah, would you like to speak to the process of introducing the group to what we've done?
Sure. So we, there was a group of hiring committee of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 7-ish. And so we met with, the top 2 candidates. And we have, the hiring committee recommends, going forward. Because we are very impressed with your expertise and, what you can bring to the table. And one key thing that we do think is really gonna be a true partner. So that's a goal.
Thank you. Although I was initially concerned when I saw the hula hoops out there. Which I was gonna do. Yeah, I am looking forward to it. Avi and I have communicated. And I think the relationship that I have in the current job, the former current job, with the treasurer that we have a genuine partnership. He reports to the board as a whole, report to the executive director, so that's a fiduciary separation hours, checks and balances, internal control, whatever. And the idea of a couple of words of the collaborative problem solving worked well between us and the local board. That, and I think from the point of view of all the stakeholders, it's important. They're comfortable with the fiduciary relationship between administration and between towns being held. And it also is very transparent. We give the impression of the whole, nothing to hide.
So before we have a motion to appoint here, does anyone have questions for Glenn? And while you are thinking on your questions, just take a moment to publicly, for the record here, give thanks to Charlie Lane, who served as treasurer for a couple decades, potentially many, many, many years, ever since we've
at
had
least
a treasurer
15 years, yeah.
for the district, for longstanding service well beyond how long he perhaps might have wanted to do so. So we are very grateful for that, but we're also grateful for this transition. So what are some questions?
Not a question for Greg. Greg, thank you for being here Glenn, sorry. But for our information and the public's information, just clarification for why we do this vote and appointment rather than as a administration. That would be helpful.
Do you want to speak to that, or would you like to?
Designated school committee appointment.
I just went to the training. I can speak to this. There are, I think it's either 2 or 3 positions, which it is actually the school committee rather than the administration's role to appoint. It was news to me, but that's what we were taught.
This is the appointment.
Did you talk about the reason?
Primarily because he has some, my words, but a little bit of a watchdog responsibility, and he reports directly to school committee to ensure that we are meeting all of our fiduciary responsibilities.
Yeah, unfortunately, it has never come up forever, but Kevin, our treasurer, he has a direct line to the board of answers. And the idea is that if you found anything untoward, you could report that to the full board without both myself or the executive director. So it was, like I said, that opens that transparency. Need to question.
Important.
Can I give 60 seconds on this? I'll keep it very brief. There is a difference between what a business manager does, which is overseeing accounting and budget, which is documenting what our records say, and the person who literally touches and manages the cash. And so those duties need to be separated for good practice, and that's why the statute is that way. And because obviously cash is your ultimately biggest risk that auditors, I think you may remember when Frank Soretti came, he said, this is what we look for. That's why you want that in a position that reports to you. It's a little less glamorous in some ways than all the budgets of where we're going, but it's one of the things you want to feel total confidence on and have direct access to information about. So that's why that comes to you, and that's why we have to partner together, and have it be a collaborative.
thank you all for responding to that.
Any other questions? All right, would you like to make the motion?
I motion to appoint Glenn to be our treasurer. We need to say it back.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Motion carries. You made it. Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll work with Glenn as he's exiting from the consortium to set up a start date with you, and we'll work with Charlie on
In a
the
transition.
transition. We're excited, yeah.
Yay.
As am I.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank
You are
you.
welcome to stay or not. It's entirely up to you.
If you don't mind, I would like to say, I think throughout my career, the finance side doesn't have a whole lot of education side, but it does give me a flavor and a sense what the individual organization is like.
Not at all. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So do we want to bounce back or do we want the turf replacement update and then get into the meat of what's
Let's
left?
do turf,
Okay,
please.
Yeah, yeah.
So turf, I know you have been reading the updates, but we're really in a process. We are waiting for test results to come back. Everything that can be done prior to test results has been done, which is working with the Conservation Commission on the site prep. You've probably seen it stretching across, which I didn't realize was part of the differences. They did ask for some changes, so those will come forward. I think it might cost about an additional $2,500. That would be essentially a change order. We have a recommended 15 to 20% change order budget when we approved. I think our final number was about 17% for change order, so on $1.6 billion budget. That was what was recommended. We're in very good shape. This is a very small deal. The next thing that we're dealing with is just timeline. And so we know we've got the turf carpet results already back. They look great. We've been waiting for the other ones. We don't have them yet. Every day we're on a day-to-day basis. So we heard on Friday that they might have them as early as yesterday. Didn't come through. They're in daily communication with the testing organization. So it's not, we don't have any information that there's a thing or an issue. It's just about them getting through the process. I do know that every summer there's just tons of jobs happening. One of our biggest concerns was, would we have an issue where we finally get the test results through and then they're kind of waiting, they've gone on to a different job or anything like that. And so what they're saying is they're on a day-by-day basis, ready to get in here and start getting it going. So we have their attention in terms of them wanting to start ASAP, and they're committed with the daily communication as well as the commitment that their team is ready to get in and start removing. We feel like, we're in good shape in terms of the schedule. I think the 10th is the day this week where where the adjusted schedule that ends on the 30th would have that process complete. So we're kind of right there, but until we have them, we don't have them. So we're going to do another update. Probably tomorrow is when we typically offer and get our updates published. I'm hoping I'll have information there, but you will know as soon as I know. So that's kind of the update. And then I think the bigger two other things that came up in some of my one-on-one conversations with people who had questions. One, budget. I feel like we're in very good shape with budget. Certainly don't want to jinx that or anything like that, but I feel very good about that. Why? Number one, the construction process was bid, was a contract. Number two, we have a very reasonable change order buffer if we need it. And none of what we're talking about is really about change orders. So I think for email or two we got from the community about how this could impact budget, I don't believe that that would be the case. Number two, how does it relate to program and the delay? Clearly I'm annoyed. I know there are people who have been annoyed about the fact that this happened. But what we understand is that by holding on Brook Street until, it wasn't the original plan, until we get Highland done, we have a plan for continuity of our program. So that's the athletic director's job, to make that schedule and to work that. And she's saying, we can manage this. She wants it as soon as possible, but she has given us the information that she can run the program with Brook Street open. So I just hope, going back to, the information that we need to gather from the people who actually do that work, But that's not even something that I'm gonna micromanage. That's what Cami does. That's what we pay her to do, and she said she can run that. So I hope that gives some assurance, even though everyone's irritated for good reason. And it's not for lack of clear communication, contract language, or multiple repetition with the contractor. So at the end of the day, it's about execution. And even for the contractor, it's now being executed by another third party, which is this testing organization. So that's my update. I'm sure there'll be questions.
Question. So if Brook Street delayed, what's the delay timeline? The reason why I ask is I think the Essex is voting on the third, the other half of the money, November or October? November. So by November, they want to see the final invoice. Are we gonna have the
Yes.
invoice by then?
Like we should. Yep, and by the way, the Brook Street was, so one thing that we had them do was, we said, okay. Testing is behind, so we've got to figure out something other than just, oh, we'll get it when we get it. So one of the things that we said is we need to compress the schedule. How can we do that? Well, there already was some buffer in the schedule. We also agreed that to the extent that we need and can use extra hours during each day, that is something that they're looking to do, and potentially weekends as well. So that's something that's available. So when the schedule did get moved and Brook Street got held, the end date is still going to meet as of now, the contractual date for Brook Street, because that timeline had a good amount of cushion in there. So we don't believe that as of now, that one would be late. So I think the goal is to wrap all of that up by the end of September, such that we would certainly be in good shape, I think, to have the final numbers.
You had mentioned that the testing was in, and that there's additional testing that you're waiting on.
Yeah.
So is that first phase of testing, was that for this field here? Because was it the testing on the actual, the product that was cut?
Yeah.
And delivered?
It's all of the above, yeah. Same fill, same top, same cushioning for both fields, so it's all one testing.
Right,
So-
but there's testing that's complete.
Came back, but the infill testing is not back yet.
That's, okay, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so they test, yep, carpet, we're tested, I think the sand is done. We don't have the results. The rubber that gets mixed with the sand is not yet done. And then the shock pad, which is, needs to be tested as well as the other one. And what we learned was that the shock pad and the crumb rubber, the testing group came back to the contractor and said, if you want these results to be worth something, you need to take a different process for how you bring those goods from your assembly line to the testing agency. Because what we said in the Conservation Commission and in the bid documents and all the specs was, we want you to be testing the actual items that are coming to our field, not just like similar goods. That takes more time.
Mhm.
It also requires these protocols to happen along the way. So not making excuses, but that is what the delay is.
And that's what the Concom wanted.
That is what they wanted. And and they, at some point they said, well, we can certainly give you results off of this material. You don't want to test the actual thing, like, we can always do that. And we said, well, it's in black and white. No, we don't want that. We want the testing on the actual items. Of course, everyone would love to have a field yesterday, but we aren't going to compromise the requests of PFAS testing that were given, that were very explicit. So we had to hold firm there, even though it means we've had to accept it.
Mhm.
Will I find the schedule still come out tomorrow? Maybe.
I spoke to Cami yesterday, late afternoon, and she was on track for tomorrow.
Any other questions?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think one thing that was in one of the memo updates was, to your point about who's doing what, sometimes that might help kind of author the update, but Cami is in charge of the program side, working with the high school principal for the school. Right, and Jason and I are managing the project from an implementation standpoint. Jason is the guy who's on the field, Jason Waldner, our facilities manager, who will understand the ins and outs of what's happening and really working with each of the contractors. And my job is to project manage. So if you have a question about budget, project management, et cetera, or facilities, feel free to send it to me or to me and Jason. And we'll certainly do what we always do, which is to report back questions, et cetera. And I think it's always good to loop in Pam, school committee items, or you can send directly to Pam first, it's up to you, but that's who does what. So I will typically not know too much about program sites, Cami. I can always tell you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, friends. 401. So we have continued business of our subcommittees. So given that we did say we would end at 4 o'clock and it's been a full day, I want to make sure that this is by the will of the body of the group here. I would submit that we need to understand our carryover and planned commitments and any parking lot items that we are going to tackle this year. We need to know what the work is in order to effectively determine what our subcommittees are going to be, so that we know what kind of investment we're actually signing up for on this, given that we will have a full year. So do we wish to commit to an extra half hour right now, or do we wish to put this as top of the agenda for our next meeting? I need to know from the committee.
Is this realistically something that can be accomplished in half an hour?
I don't.
I would doubt it, and I would encourage us to put it to our next meeting. If we're gonna set the tone for the year of trying to keep to time, let's do that.
So is there a motion?
I will make that motion.
This,
Then move
that
that
is the
agenda
next.
item for our next meeting.
Okay, so second.
Second,
Discussion.
Do we have a confirmed quorum for our August 22nd meeting?
So that is the next question.
I am not here.
I'm not here as well.
And if two of us aren't here, is there, is everyone else
Erica, you
here?
had said way back that you
Yeah,
wanted to be here.
I'm gonna have to just still be in, I'm not sure, my son leaves on the 23rd, so it's not a great night, but it was nice, so we're still working on a couple plans, so that's
To
why.
confirm, what are we moving to? The meeting? Is it a subcommittee appointment or is it even including the chance, I mean, the Sunday bucket list?
I'd say that whole
Yeah.
segment in the
Looking at
the
two
year,
already
the
working.
year ahead.
The carryover
Right.
work that we have to accomplish for next year, like the things we as a group need to do. The bucket list to see what we want to add to that and can reasonably expect to add to that, and then make the appointments into September.
Can I recommend, I feel the bucket list was gonna take 1 to 2 or 3 hours, but what if we have another full day, maybe like another working session? So for those of, the two of you that cannot attend on 22nd, you can attend the working group, so all of us can be there and we can work through some of the things. At least,
So you're suggesting we add a meeting?
a working group. meeting.
I think if, this needs to be done in public.
I'm not available on the 22nd. We have new teacher induction, students coming in, so we're fairly committed that whole week. That's the day they designated for the launch. I'm sorry, no, that whole week, there's like, there are
Yeah, yeah.
teacher meetings all week.
Okay, so you're gonna
During the
say,
day.
I'm gonna say no. I had put it on the schedule, but I wasn't sure that I can make it, and I forgot.
I think that's a reasonable.
so beyond that, when is our next scheduled meeting, and do we wish to add a meeting in between? Next scheduled would be what? September 5th.
September 5th.
I don't know if it is, it depends on what we already have for that date.
Realistically, I don't see us adding a meeting in between, knowing the way that schedules are going to accelerate the closer to the school year gets.
So do we want to make that a top priority item for September 5th then? Is there anything on our schedule for the 5th, Pam, that is non-negotiable?
Everything could be
Just not
pushed.
looking at right now.
Would we like to consider a slightly earlier start on the 5th?
First meeting. Compared to
Tuesday, or what's it done?
The only, that's actually why I asked about it, for the social meeting. I guess not too many people are in conflicts, but I will have conflicts with.
Okay, so
But I'm probably the only person. here.
I'm looking for the,
Yeah.
Which day are we talking about?
we're at September 5th. That's our next scheduled meeting, since we will not have availability for August 22nd currently. And we are seeing that between now and September 5th, it doesn't look like, I mean, we can't even get collaboration. I mean, getting all the people for an important I think this is a critical conversation to have. So I would suggest we just hold this till September 5th.
and I'll encourage, and I haven't done it myself either, fill in the sheet for what you have on your bucket list I think only a couple of people did it, and I'm one who let it slide after our last meeting as well, so I need to do that myself. And as the, I think the holder of it going forward, I think I need to advocate for it and do it myself.
You have, I will acknowledge, I have not put anything on there because I've chosen not to. So if you don't have things you want, that's fine, but if you do, please get them on there, because that's came in today to people.
Do you want me to add the commitments to that list or keep the commitments separately? Does it help? Like,
I think.
the
for that
commitments in
meeting,
my
we can-
mind are like, we have TA negotiations, we've got
Yes.
jointly. I'll put it.
I'll just tell everyone, the only thing on my bucket list is to pass a budget that funds our school. I don't have any plans.
Okay, so did we have a motion to move this?
Yes, we did, and seconded.
Okay, and that was discussion, all in favor? Okay. These items to next meeting. Our final item is.
Your motion was to move that item to the 8:22 meeting?
Oh,
No.
no, the 9/5.
9/5.
Cancel
And then
8:22.
So cancel 8:20, because that was what we said originally.
And we'll just continue to do vouchers in the interim by.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, okay, great.
I'm looking for our school committee
Can you
calendar just to
identify
see.
what email circulated the schedule for the upcoming year? Do you know?
That was at our last, we had a bunch of, they've been in our packets. I don't know off the top of my head. They're in my other
The
binder.
calendar?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
the next
looking for
year.
that too, for some
Okay,
reason. I'm
thanks. I
having
can
trouble
find it
searching.
after the meeting.
As we're talking, I'll keep looking.
Yeah, I set the wrong binder out for that. So we will close with school committee comment, and for the interest of time, at this point, can we just keep it to brief comments for today? Is there a brief question or comment that anyone would like to share?
It's been a very long day. I just want to thank you.
That is my comment as well. Thank you all for being here, for engaging, for welcoming Michael, even this morning. I think it's been really productive for us to experience some of the work that the administration team and other district leaders have been going through the last year. And I personally found it quite valuable, and I hope that we all did too. So thank you all for this very long day and for being here. Unless there's anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
I,
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn.
do you mind if I take a meeting here? Or just
No, it's
let them
fine.
get locked up or something?
I know, plenty of time.
All right.
I can't,
It's just going to.
for some reason, I can't search right now. I think-
the only place I saw was.
Yes, I am.
Brian, you're mad at me.
Anyway, you set up some blackout dates and let's drive for the blackout.
I think the only thing we had on the, not the only thing, but we had goal setting, kind of open of the year report, and nothing else
Substantial.
defined at that point. I don't think I had I would not have put the principals on for that first Tuesday to come in. I think they start the next week.
I think that if we are able to get a collaboration meeting between now and then too,